And what we are here for tonight is a very special conversation with two wonderful authors who have a second book coming out, and I'm very excited for them to be here. And I'm going to do just a brief intro as they bring themselves up and make them real people on the screen, just to give you an idea of who we're dealing with, which you already know. But so our first author, Gilly Segal, is co-author of Why We Fly, and also the previous book, Not Dying with You Tonight. And I'm gonna read this because there's one part in here that I want to come back to. She grew up in Florida and attended Hebrew University and Emory School of Law. By day, she's the chief legal officer for an advertising agency group. Her not-so-secret identity is author. Gilly has been writing in one form or another since she wrote her first young adult novel, a surefire YA romance fanfic typed out on an electric typewriter, which is awesome. Although she will confess it was titled Claudia, she will neither confirm nor deny that any copies still exist. And I'm always fascinated by the manuscripts in the drawer. When Gilly's not lawyering, reading, or writing, she can be found exploring Decatur, Georgia with her 3 kids, visiting ice rinks around the country with her hockey-playing son, and searching bakeries the world over for the perfect French macaroon. Her favorite so far is rose, how do you say that? Lychee? Lychee, oh, go ahead. And joining her co-author and resident I don't know, vocal projectionist, Kimberly Latrice Jones, who I always love to have. Now, in addition to being an author, Kim's also very well known for her viral videos that came out last year during the Black Lives Matter protests and uprising, things like that. How We Can Win, which was during the George Floyd protests, and then shortly after that, the 7-minute video using Monopoly as an analogy. I don't know, I was going to say analogy, but analogy to explain the history of racism and the impact on Black Americans, which was fantastic and passionate and wonderful. And I'm so glad that it blew up because it needed to. And not only did that just go viral, but then suddenly Trevor Noah and LeBron James and Madonna and these are names that were attached to you, which is awesome. And it was featured on shows like Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Kim has a long list of things she's been featured in, including Ms. Magazine, 17, Paste Magazine, Bustle, Hello Giggles, which I love, Book List, Publishers Weekly, School Library Journal, and she was the book Brahmin in an issue of Self-Awareness. She resides in Atlanta and is the proud mother of a wonderful, I'm adding that in there, a wonderful gifted boy. She lives for wigs and nail art, as her style icons are Dolly Parton, Shaka Khan, and Diana Ross. That's just a great bio. Their first book, I'm Not Dying with You Tonight, was nominated for an NAACP Image Award, Georgia Author of the Year Award, and the Sibelius Awards. The NAACP is such a tremendous honor. And I know actually, Kim, I saw an interview with you. I'm jumping right into this, by the way. Welcome. Hello.
Hello.
I'm just so eager to get into this. The NAACP thing was such a weird, and I saw an interview where I know at least one where Kim, you had mentioned that you had written down that you wanted to win this award for several years in a row. So you manifested this into your life. So well done. But it's not only is it an honor, but that's also a great lesson in setting goals and believing in yourself and to the point that you're like, I'm going to do this. And I think that is incredible. Why We Fly is the second book that the two of you have authored together. That is primarily what we're here to talk about. And that one drops this coming Tuesday, October 5th. It becomes a real book baby in the world. And I'm so excited for you both. And I hope that it has every bit the success the first one did.
Thank you.
But we'll lead with I'm Not Dying with You Tonight, because I just had one question about that one. It was certainly from your perspective, it had to have come from out of nowhere. You wrote the book and you hope for the best and you want things to go well. And then suddenly it's on the New York Times bestsellers list and it's selling worldwide and getting attention and being at least picked up for a possible movie. I'm not sure where that's at in the process right now, if it's just I see some eyebrows over there. But it's very exciting stuff, and I'm very curious. This is the first book out in the world, and it's such a big thing. How did this transform your lives?
I'll let Gilly answer that one first.
Well, one very big change is that sometimes I call Kimberly now and she's like, gotta call you back. I'm on the phone with Parliament. British Parliament? Yes, British Parliament.
Periodically, they want to Zoom with me.
That really happens.
The other thing is that, publishing is, none of us know how it works. I saw like a really funny video that Tiffany Jackson did today, and she was like holding on the line for Jesus because she was trying to figure out how the New York Times bestseller list works. And she's like, since no one knows, maybe God can tell me if I could just get him on the phone. And so it's like, I'm Not Dying With You Tonight was such a slow grow for us. We think the publisher had pretty high expectations of what it could be because of our pre-existing relationships with the literary world, because I was a bookseller. I had worked as a bookseller at Little Shop of Stories for almost 6 years at that point. And Gilly and I were both heavily embedded in the YA community. And so they thought, because we already had these kind of like built-in relationships, that the word would spread pretty fast. And so I think their expectation was that we would have made the list debut week or something like that. And it didn't. We made it a year later. But it's funny, we're just on a call with all of our Sourcebooks family today. And it's like, Sourcebooks continue to like nurture that book and figure out interesting marketing and all of that stuff. So when we had the big year in 2020 where it made the list and it got optioned for film rights and all of that, it was crazy because we even saw a change in the type of festivals that we were invited to. Gilly and I used to have a running joke that we loved it where we were, but we were on what we call the Chitlin circuit of the book world. Like, we went to where all the mid-list authors went, and but we loved it there. We loved all the people that we got to meet and hang out with. And it's like, all of a sudden, festivals that we had like dreamed of going to but never got invited to were calling to invite us, albeit then we had to do it via Zoom. But we started getting these calls and people were more interested in us. And then Time Magazine reached out and was interested in talking to us. It was like everything changed in like a month. In like, I don't even know if I should say a month, in a week. In a week, we went from like, as they used to say back in the 90s, not to hot.
I never got to finish that sentence in the 90s. Mine was always just not.
Oh, no.
No, not true. No,
Not true.
not so hot now.
Yeah, lots of hot.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. We all know I was just fishing for that, so.
Well done.
Well, I don't want to undersell the fact that not only did you write a book from varying vantages, varying point of views of two girls who come together and find this friendship through a very traumatic incident, but you yourselves are very good friends and have been for a very long time. Like you said, embedded in the YA community and YA book club, and I do YATL and everything that all of you both were doing. And I'm curious because, as a writer and somebody who is completely terrified at the prospect of co-writing a book with someone, how in the world does that work?
It's the best.
Yeah.
You should not be terrified. You should do it.
Don't be terrified. But do it with friends. Don't do it with a random.
Yeah, we were really good friends beforehand. We both say that we don't think we could have written this book without having friendship and trust between us beforehand. But it's sort of a gift, right? If you can learn to lean into your strengths and lean on each other for your weaknesses, right? Like, there are writing things that I am better at, and there are writing things that Kim is a master at. And so it's like, Kim is a master of pacing and dialogue. And so we lean on her for that. And then conversely, I'm better at sort of structure and interiority. And so we lean on me for that. And if you learn to recognize those strengths and weaknesses and not be precious about them, it makes for a really great partnership. You know, it's like a lot of times I'm like, here, I have written this thing that sounds like Pride and Prejudice written by a 45-year-old, fix it. And conversely, she's like, here are 4 pages of a script, turn it into a book. And it makes it kind of a gift to work together that way.
Yeah, and even in the way in which we have into our business, because a lot of times I think that's the overlooked conversation of the publishing world, is people love to talk about the creative, but they don't love to talk about the fact that this is a business, and you have to be like, you're running a business. You yourself become a full-fledged business when you're an author. And it's like, Gilly's an attorney. And she's an amazing copy editor because she was raised by copy editors. And she's very organized and structured in a way that I am not. So she like keeps me on track. She's like, no, we have these 4 emails that are overdue that we have to respond to and that we have to schedule dates for. And is this day okay for you? And what time are we supposed to be there? And all of that stuff. And just like she said, on the flip side, like, I'm a master networker. I'm going to be out in these streets, getting us some connections, finding us some celebrities willing to endorse our books, putting on a dog and pony show somewhere and convincing people they need to have us come into their school. Like, that's my part. I'm a marketer, you know what I mean? And so all the way around, both creatively and business wise, we had just allow the other person to run with what it is that they do.
Yeah, the other piece of that is like just being real honest and upfront with each other about the logistics side. People always ask us, like, do you fight? We really don't. We're not that we don't get frustrated and annoyed with each other, but the best thing that we did fairly early on in the partnership was get really honest about how this partnership was going to work, right? We both work day jobs. So it's like, how much time do you have to contribute to writing? When can you do this? What's a realistic time frame? What are you going to contribute? What I'm going to contribute? And I think that smoothed the way a lot because we're real honest about that kind of thing, and we accept each other for who we are and how we work, and that just eliminated a lot of friction.
And we also write side by side, right? So we found very early on that we were better when we together. So we schedule our writing time and then we sit side by side and write. So we saw several sets of our friends who co-authored books end up no longer speaking to each other, end up suing each other in court, all kinds of shenanigans. And it's like the way in which we write, although it might be frustrating for other people to just be, there's no way to not do your part if you're sitting next to the person. Like
that's fair. Yeah. Well, I mean, I figure, and you had mentioned this, but I figured like the easy question would be, what were the challenges that came up? But I mean, it's obvious that you guys connect really well, and that real friends can work through any kind of challenges. So I would actually rather ask, what came out of this for your friendship that wasn't there before?
We're way closer. Like we're way close. Like I would jump out on the ledge to say we're best friends, and we were friends and we were friendly, when we started this journey. But we're best friends now, and like there's nothing that's happening in my life that she doesn't know about, and vice versa, down to the kids and personal lives and all of that kind of stuff. We take care of each other. We take care of each other when we're sick, when we're sad, when we're happy, when we need to celebrate each other, whatever the case may be. And just, it was just also like a cultural education for both of us. I am embarrassed to say how little I knew about the Jewish culture before I really spent time with Gilly. And it's funny because all it did was elevate an idea that we have that, you should have, a diverse group of friends, not because you want to tokenize anybody and make them your Black friend or your Jewish friend or your queer friend or whatever the case may be, but it's just like, be open to having diverse relationships because it educates you without you being harmful. Because sometimes when we're wanting to learn about someone else's culture, we can be harmful unintentionally in the way in which we approach it and try to garner that information, but it happens organically when you're just like in love with the person.
Yeah. I mean, we've lived together, we've traveled the country together, and that's, you can't do that and not have a different level of closeness and dependence on one another. And I agree with Kim about learning about each other's cultures up close. Like in I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, Lena calls Campbell Becky. like 40 times. And, I am embarrassed to say I didn't understand the origin of that phrase. I had to ask him when we were writing, I'm like, why is she calling her Becky all the time? And that, and now I'm like, that's because I lived to like not a diverse culture. Right? I didn't have a diverse friend group that felt comfortable sharing in front of me openly. Right. So to the extent that I had Black friends, right, like they were code switching in front of me still. Right. And that's sort of a thing that I have learned is being an ally and being a safe space is an earned thing. Right. And if your friends are not speaking in front of you in the language, to use Jackie Woodson's essay, in the language that they speak around their Sunday dinner table, then you're not as close as you think you are.
So, but kind of peeling off of friendship, but staying in it. Why We Fly, again, much like the I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, you have two characters that differing points of view, culturally speaking, and they're friends, cheerleaders, and we're dealing with an issue with the high school football team kneeling that causes an uproar and tests their friendship and tests the limits of everything around them. I'm curious because I'm always a big fan of the focus of friendships in books. And I'm curious if, from your vantage as writers, why do you feel that writing about friendships at the center of a story empowers that story?
Ooh, it's such a good question. I mean, it's the emotional heart of the story, right? The same way that in a romance, a love story is the emotional heart of the story. And ultimately, that's why we're reading, right? The plot is interesting and the plot is what moves us from point A to point Z. But why would you care unless you're compelled by the emotional heart, which for us is friendship stories, right? I'm Not Dying With You Tonight was a book that brought two friends together, and Why We Fly is actually a book that tears two friends apart.
Yeah, and also at the age in which we write for young adults, their friend groups are having such a large impact on their lives and the decisions that they make. And so one of the things that we focus on a lot in our books is that kids will often put themselves in actual danger in avoidance of being in trouble. So you will go down a rabbit hole trying to keep yourself from getting grounded or yelled at or suspended, or at school, and your plan to do that puts you in like actual danger. And so we want kids to be more conscious of the type of friends that they choose, what that looks like to be a supportive friend versus having like making decisions that can be detrimental to your future. All of that plays a really big role. And it's like, hindsight is 2020. And a lot of times people will say to us, and not just us, I have this conversation with a lot of YA authors. They'll ask why the kids are making such bad decisions, if you will, in YA novels. And I'm like, do you remember being 16? You made a lot of bad decisions.
Just a series of terrible decisions.
Right, like just a bunch of bad decisions. And it's like,
yes.
The knowledge that you have as an adult is based on the lessons you learned from those decisions. So as YA authors, we're writing those teachable moments.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if there's no plot at some point in time, if all you're writing about is people who are like, got it all together, making excellent decisions, doing the right thing all the time, it's a really boring book in which not a lot is going to happen. So to some extent, plot requires people to do unexpected and sometimes stupid things.
Yeah, it's the unexpected and stupid things and conflict that we love so much that created reality television. And that's why it's so entirely popular with people, because we love train wrecks. We love watching people fall apart. So yeah, no, I totally get that. But another big issue, and it's consistent through both books, is taking on a political hot topic. In this particular one, we're dealing with kneeling during the national anthem, which was, of course, many years before started by Colin Kaepernick in the NFL, and oh my gosh, it was this terrible thing that was an affront to America and everything, and it kind of built over time to becoming a very notable form of protest, quiet, peaceful protest. And I'm curious as to why it was that you chose to integrate into this story.
So this is actually also inspired by a real live events by cheerleaders at Kennesaw State University who, inspired by Kaepernick, took a knee during the national anthem, and they were removed from the field. The team was prohibited from going back on the field for the rest of the season. Some of those cheerleaders lost their scholarships. Like, there's litigation to this day. And I think we're 4 or 5 years later at this point in time. So, I mean, honestly, what it is an ode to athlete activists, because athlete activism didn't spring into being from Colin Kaepernick, but what oftentimes happened is we look back at it through a modern lens. So, we're inspired by the Kennesaw State cheerleaders. Kim met them, and I won't steal her lines, but like, we started looking into this. And I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I remember like the iconic image that was celebrated at the time of John Carlos and Tommie Smith on the podium at the '68 Olympics with Peter Norman, who's the white guy on the podium. I remember that as, a powerful, positive, iconic civil rights image. I remember that being celebrated. But when we started looking into it and we researched it, at the time, John Carlos and Tommie Smith were sent home from the Olympics days later in disgrace. Their medals were stripped from them by the U.S. Olympic Committee. Peter Norman went back to Australia and became a pariah. He, as late as 2000, the Sydney Olympics, he was not invited to the opening ceremonies. So through historically, we were like, yay, we all celebrate this moment. But at the time, they were really ostracized and suffered for the choice that they made to stand up. And it was like, it's important to remember what it was like then, and not just through the sort of rose-colored lens of history.
Yeah, it was an honor to march with those girls. I was at a protest in 2017 that was organized by the Georgia Moms, which is an organization of women who have lost their kids to some form of gun violence, police brutality, all of that. And so I was marching with them, and the Kennesaw State cheerleaders who had just lost their scholarships showed up at the protest. And I got a chance to just kind of like quickly, briefly pick their brains and talk to them, because Gilly and I had already started like working on this piece. And I was like, pot of goals, perfect group right here. Give me 10 minutes to drill you with questions. And I just was so blown away at what brilliant, smart, intelligent young women they were. And although they didn't think that it would go as far as them losing scholarships and things like that, they knew, they were very clear that there was going to be some blowback for that decision. And they were standing in it firmly. And once, kind of the social justice bug, if you will, had bitten them, there they were at this protest with me. And keep in mind, I'm talking 2017, before it was cool, popular, hip, or happening to be in the middle of the street yelling at people with bullhorns and blocking traffic. So that they made such a conscious decision at such a young age, and they were sticking to their guns, was so impressive to me. But then Gilly and I started thinking, but what if some kids didn't think it through? And they just like, we live in the era of social media, and, maybe they were or weren't doing it for clout. Maybe they did just think it would be a cool image that they could post the next day. They thought they'd get a bunch of attaboys. And it's like, that is the worst thing that a young adult has to deal with, is doing what they believe in their heart is the right thing and not receiving praise for it. Because we have to keep in mind, these books are all about first. So yes, at 45 years old, I know what that looks like. But what did that look like when I was 15? The first time I made a decision thinking it was the right thing and was told in a loud, resounding way that it was not.
Yeah. A couple of questions that have come in, and for everybody else there, if you've got questions, by all means, drop them into the Q&A button at the center of the bottom of your screen. First question is, when you're writing side by side, are you collaborating the whole time, or are you writing your own parts? And she said, I know you each wrote different chapters, in parentheses there.
We did each write different chapters, and I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. That is not true for Why We Fly. We switched the way that we wrote it. So with I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, we each took responsibility predominantly for one character. Like, I basically wrote Lena and Gilly wrote Campbell, but then we would edit within each other's chapters, because they're so the whole journey is almost the two of them, you know what I mean? And so they're so heavy in each other's chapters that we had to edit within each other's chapters for consistency and voice. And for the same reasons we were saying before, like understanding, the cultural backgrounds, markers, linguistics, all of that of each character. With Why We Fly, we decided to do it differently. And we literally sat side by side and just was like, write this sentence. Okay, curate that. I would just ramble on and Gilly would like, I'm keeping notes. I'm about to chunk all of that in. Now let's clean it up. Now let's go back. Or Gilly would write a passage and I would be like, let's fix this dialogue. Or I would write a couple, some dialogue and she'd be like, we need to, where are they? What are they seeing? Let's add some stuff. And so, we did it different both times. We also just recently wrote a short story in an anthology that's coming out in January called Game On. And we did that one the same way we did Why We Fly, except it's the first time it's not a dual narrative. So, each thing that we write is different. We're gonna get together tomorrow and start putting together proposals for new stuff, and who knows how those books will be written.
That's cool. It's such an interesting thing. I remember I was a fan of the Peter and the Starcatcher series by Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson, and I remember hearing them talk about the writing process, and they did the thing you're talking about with the first book, and that they each wrote a chapter. They were not sitting next to each other. But I think that to me is almost more terrifying because I am such a big fan of keeping pacing correct and flow from chapter to chapter. And I'm curious now, when you were doing the separate chapters, how did you then come back to address the flow? Did you do it when the draft was done, or did you, as you were piecing it together, like stitch it and make it work?
So interestingly, we only wrote about a third of the very first draft of this book. And we like to say our books are as much about perspective as race or anything else. And for the first book, we were like, it'd be a cool way to show perspective. We're going to show every event from both characters' point of view. So we wrote like the fight at the concession stand, and then we jumped back in time and Lena would tell that same event from how it looked through her eyes. And we wrote about a third of the draft that way. And we sent it out to early readers, beta readers, and across the board to a person, they were all like, that sucks. Boo, this is terrible.
They're like, I can't get through it. This is so bad.
And what we realized they were right. When 5 different people tell you the same thing, someone's got a point. But the plot, it wasn't moving the plot, right? It was disjointed, right? And the timing wasn't working. And so from that point on, we plotted it really specifically together. And we did that side by side. And that was when we sort of more took a little bit of an individual view, like character wrote our chapters and then sat side by side to edit it. And I feel like in the editing, that's probably where all of the continuity and voice stuff came together.
Gotcha. So with Why We Fly, what do you hope readers will gain from hearing this story?
Well, one, I hope people will be more patient with strong-willed young women. Both of these women are, young women, old girls are very strong-willed and passionate about what their future looks like. And although, we try not to kitchen sink our books, we try not to be like, we covered these 57 topics, and that's one book. We try to keep it, what we're known for, we try to keep it pretty, concise and have a focus. But a lot of times there are these layers to the one conversation that are very important. And one of the layers that I personally am excited about, because this is, I think, representative of both Gilly and I, is that we're big voices, we're booming personalities, and not everyone is in love with that, and not everyone knows how to nurture that. And a lot of times people who are a little more quiet presenting, I find it interesting that whenever we're trying to uplift one group of people, we think we have to demonize the other in order to do so. It's like, you can't make space for quiet girls without talking about how you're sick of brash and bossy girls, or like, you can't make space for skaters without, trying to demonize bikers, and it's just like, I find it interesting that in an attempt to make sure that people who have a more quiet disposition make space, is that our way to say that they deserve it is to demean people who are just born big, if you will. And so we wanted to focus on how girls who are born big have to learn how to navigate the world, because the world keeps telling them they're an annoyance. The world keeps telling them that they're too much. The world keeps telling them to like bring it down. And it's like, I can be as big, brash, and bold as I want to and still learn how to make space for my quiet sisters. And so, we wanted to tackle that with these two girls, is that part of the reason why people are so annoyed with them is not just what they said, but it's who they are.
Love that. Love that. I kind of want, and I feel a new Kim shirt coming on. Am I too much, or are you not enough? For me, it's about mistakes, right? Especially we're all really hard on ourselves. Kids are really hard on themselves, and they're growing up in a world where almost everything they do is extremely public. Thank God it wasn't like that for us. But I mean, sort of if people took away one thing from this book, especially kids, for me, it would be, we are all more than our worst mistakes, or at least we have the capability to be. That's not to say we should give ourselves a pass and that there doesn't need to be work, but I think there has to be a road to redemption if you make mistakes. And we have to believe that we're all more than those worst moments that we wish we could forget, but you can live through it and work to do better the next time.
And I want to shift to the idea of the importance of representation in I would say all forms of art, but we're just going to focus on books right now because we're talking books. Given that you write for teens and you're working to give them what we hope is a positive viewpoint that aligns with something they can identify with, whether that's being a teen or making bad choices or being, underrepresented segment of the society or anything, whatever it happens to be. How much do you reflect on representation while you're working on the draft?
A lot. It's kind of our bread and butter. And just because we want to be sensitive, we want to be cautious, we don't want to tokenize people. We don't want to be like, oh, we're missing a Latinx person, or we're missing a queer person, so let's just add one in for the sake of adding. Like, no, if we add characters who come from culturally diverse backgrounds, we want to make sure that they're rich, full, three-dimensional people, that they are not just the lucky sidekick being added into the story, and that it makes sense to identify and or to not identify their cultural experience as part of the story. I think it is interesting to add people from, culturally diverse backgrounds, but then that's also, again, when we start talking about the business of book selling, that is when it becomes important to integrate sensitivity readers, and to make sure that you are doing justice to these characters, to make sure that you are not putting a bland, one-dimensional version of that person on the page. And because Gilly and I also want our books to reflect the world that we live in. My world is full of people of all different backgrounds and cultural experiences and gender selection and all of that. And so we just want to make sure that it's reflective of real life. And because that's what we think had happened, in the older candidates, like it wasn't reflective of real life. Or if it was reflective of real life, it was from a very, very selfish perspective of like, I am going to write this book and I'm going to add in this Black character who's a maid, because that's the only person I know is a maid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would add to that I think broadly diverse representation is really important, because no community is a monolith. And I think it's really easy sometimes for publishers or people who are not from the marginalized community to be like, oh, we have our, Black contemporary story about police brutality. We have our, Latino fantasy story, but there are a multitude of experiences within those identities, and they all deserve. We have a friend who says the bookshelf is infinite. The bookshelf is infinite if we choose to partake of it, and all of those stories belong on the shelf and written. In this book, Lenny, the white character, is also Jewish, and she's Reform Jewish. And growing up, I feel like I read a lot of books about the Orthodox Jewish community, or I read a lot of books about Holocaust Jews. And it was sort of like that. Those are important and necessary, don't get me wrong, but they had nothing to do with my Jewish community or my Jewish experience growing up. So I wanted to put on the page, and I'm graced with Kim, who was like, yes, let's do this. A totally different type of Jewish character for whom Judaism is a part of her experience. It's really not the central role for her here. And she's a Reform Jew. So I hope that kids will be like, hey, yeah, there I am. I'm interested in these other books, but I'm not in them, even though I, ostensibly should be.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like you might have addressed this a little bit already in those answers, but for writers who are trying to remain conscious of representation as they're working on their manuscripts, what kind of advice would you give a writer trying to do that, but maybe not sure exactly what they need to do? Because we want to be better about it. That's the whole point here, is we want to be better about it. So how can we be better about that?
I would say tell them they should think about 3 primary steps as they begin the journey. The first is research. Whatever type of person that you are, trying to write about, research them to no ends, like until you're exhausted with it, until you have an account with an app you didn't even know you needed because of the deep dive that you've done on the research of that. And then the second thing I would say is get a sensitivity reader. Not just the one that's assigned to you by the publishing house, but look around at your friend group, your connections, and or reach out to people if you don't have that connection, and get a beta reader that's able to do a sensitivity read on that person and that type of lived experience. And the third thing that I will say is find the nearest child, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, give them the book, get a beta read on them, because they don't care about your little feelings, okay? They have not learned like adults to pacify you and to make you feel good about yourself and to lie to you for the sake of not being involved in an altercation. They are going to tell you the truth, and they are having a lived experience that is organic around their friends that they're not consciously clocking because they're still kids. And they're going to tell you, I have a Black friend. She don't do that. I've been to her house. That's wrong.
I think I would add to that, if you are writing about a community who experiences marginalization that you do not share, I think you have to ask yourself the really hard question of, why am I the person to tell this story of this community's marginalization, right? Not to say that you're reflecting on the page a marginalized person, but if you're telling the story of their marginalization, why are you the right person to do that? And I say this as a white person, especially to white people, right? And I would refer you to Jacqueline Woodson has written beautifully about this. Grace Lynn has written really beautifully about this. Just interrogate why you think you're the right person to tell this story. And maybe you are. I'm not saying that you're not, but so Kim and I wrote I'm Not Dying With You Tonight together. If she had said, I'm not interested in writing with you, that book wouldn't exist, because my personal line was, I could never do this story justice on my own. And it's not my story to tell by myself. And the idea would have just flown out into the ether, and maybe somebody else would have picked it up someday. But that is my personal line of telling the story of another community's marginalization.
And the obvious final one, get yourself a co-author. Get yourself a co-author. We are seeing lots of books pop up similar to ours. Obviously, before us, Jason Reynolds and Brandon had their book, All American Boys. Now, Marie Benedict and her co-author, Victoria Murphy, have a co-authored book that is, a Black and a white woman. And there is like a ton of them on the market now, even like Adam Silvera and Who did he just write a book with?
Becky Albertelli.
Oh, one of my friends.
Also, Maida Cuevas and Marie Marquardt, who are also local Georgia writers, have a book coming out soon called Does My Body Offend You, which is another co-authored story.
Yeah, it's like it's now it's an acceptable, cool thing to do. The publishers know how to negotiate the deals now if you have different agents and all of that jazz. And it's just like, you know, if I wake up tomorrow and decide that I really have an idea for this, or you know, a story that is the song of my heart, that is based on a community that is not mine, my first line of attack is going to be to find someone from that community that I have a built-in relationship with. Again, we're not trying to go around and tokenize people and say, hey, I need a friend that looks like you right now. But
yeah, it's not cover. It's not, you know, cover to do what you want to do without thought for the community.
But if you have a pre-existing relationship with someone that you've maybe desired to do a creative project with already, and you're like, oh, now I have this idea is could be great for us, talk to them. And that way, I know for me, you will feel a lot safer with what's going on the page, knowing you have a partner to vet it.
Yeah. I mean, you had mentioned sensitivity readers, and I'm curious. So if a writer is they have something that they want to have a sensitivity reader for, how do they find one?
So you can actually find them online, right? So there are, if you are writing on your own without a publisher, you can find them.
Twitter account you guys need to follow. Give me a second. Go ahead.
Okay. Like you can find them online. There are people who offer this as a professional service. Pay your sensitivity reader. They are providing a service. Pay them. If you can't afford to pay them in cash, sometimes people are willing to take in trade, but definitely pay your sensitivity readers. And if you were working with a publisher, that ought to be a service that your publisher should be willing to pay for, right? If you're clear about the need for it and what they want, and a good publisher will recognize that, and they may have connections to existing sensitivity readers that they've worked with.
Okay, so I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm just going to spell it. But the Twitter account that you need to follow, it is spelled, and I'm right now, Jessica is so on top of things. It's going to be in the.
She's killed it.
I was going to say, the real MVP of this conversation is Jessica, who's
absolutely.
It's going to be in the group chat by the time I say the last syllable, but it is TESSERA edits. So TESSERAEDITS. They are editors, formatters, and sensitivity readers of color for traditional publishing and self-publishing. It says we run a free remote mentorship program for people of color. They are amazing. And Krista, who founded this organization and runs it, was actually our copy editor on I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. And slightly around that same time as she was editing for us, she started this program. And it's like, I am going to train sensitivity readers, basically, and copy editors and people of all different likes, so we have diversity in the editorial realm. And so I swear by her and the work she's done. She was our copy editor, and low-key did a sensitivity read without us asking on I'm Not Dying With You Tonight, and she's amazing, and that organization is amazing.
I found it too. And Jessica's already put that in there, so well done.
You're so on it, Jessica.
this is why she is the chat master. So we've got about 10 minutes left. And so if anybody has any other questions, please do throw them in there. You had said something about finding a kid, and I'm going to pull the last question of the Q&A, which is, do your kids love your books?
They love us.
So 2 of my children are too young to read my books. The oldest, she does like them. Actually, she like routinely writes the questions for our, like where we get asked to produce like reader questions. Noah, we're like, Noah, come up with the questions for us. She hates when I talk about her, which is why I hesitated to answer. But yeah, she also, like Kim said, like our own kids are sort of brutal with us. So we rely on them to be like, what do kids say these days? And they say, give me your digits. And they're like, oh my God, stop it, 40-year-olds.
No, that's not what the kids say anymore.
What do they say?
Not that.
I don't even know what the equivalent of digits is.
They don't. They just text message each other. They just put their numbers in the phone. But yeah, they're like they're very honest readers. So no, my daughter has read them and she likes them. And she, interestingly enough, there's a character in Why We Fly that Kim and I both adore. His name is Bull, and he's like he's our soothsayer. And my daughter like crushingly was like, I hate him. She was like, he's so mean.
Well, look, we're like, he's our favorite, and she's like, he's yucky. My son, who Zach knows very well, and know that my son loves tomfoolery and shenanigans, loves to make me think that he thinks that I am unimpressive and that he could care less, and that my books are as mediocre as they can get. And like that is the narrative he tells me. And then I find out stuff like one of his teachers last year told me he did me as his school project. That he was like, my social studies assignment is on my mom, Kimberly Latrice Jones, and he did some beautiful, amazing PowerPoint of my life and my lived experience and my novels, and gave rave reviews on the books. And I'm like, this is the same kid tell me I suck all the time. You around here really loving me. Come on.
He loves you. I know he does.
But kids are like contractually obligated not to admit it for a good long time. From like
you have to get your late 20s. I mean, there's that whole early getting into adulthood where you're like, no, I still know better. And then you find out you don't. And then suddenly you're willing to admit, okay, my mom and dad are pretty awesome people.
Yeah. I feel like that's the point of YA, right? A lot of people are like, what's the difference between YA and middle grade? And like, YA is literally about kids finding their place in the bigger world and asserting their independence for the first time. And oftentimes that means pushing back on the adults in their life and creating separation and doing stupid stuff because the adults are like, that's dumb. And you're like, I know what I'm doing.
I'm going to prove you wrong.
You don't.
Yeah.
I'll show you how an adult because you're not doing it right.
Exactly.
Which for us is also correct. No, I'm not doing any better than you are, but I know that is not the right choice.
Right.
Exactly. As long as you don't do the whole do as I say and not as I do thing that I've heard before, because nothing works less on kids than that.
Yeah. I've thrown that one out of my lexicon.
Yeah.
I'm like an authoritarian in my own household. I'm just like, I understand that you don't like this decision, but it is my decision. That's usually my line.
That works, yeah.
There are day job work people on the phone on this conversation right now, and I have a sneaking suspicion that some of them are like, that's what she's like at work too. Cynthia and Mary don't answer.
So I know people always say, and it's almost without fail, you get a book out, you go on tour, and the question always comes up, what are you working on next? And I'm not going to ask that because you had this book that just came out. And I would rather you say, it's like, okay, that's kind of like, a mother giving birth. And before she's even handed the child, somebody's saying, so when is the next one coming? It's just not right. It's not right. So I would rather.
Can I answer anyway? Because I want to brag on Kim.
Okay, yeah, you can. Okay. Yeah.
So obviously our book is coming out on Tuesday. Yes. But Kim has her debut adult nonfiction called How We Can Win coming out in January. And I got to read an advanced reader copy because at this point she has officially called me her best friend on YouTube. So now it's true. Of course you give your best friend your book. It's amazing. It is as beautiful and powerful as her video. And it's such it's a window into her soul, and you should all get it. So How We Can Win coming out in January.
Oh, and Zach, I have an advanced copy for you, just FYI. So
hey, that sounds awesome. I would absolutely love that.
Yeah.
I might even tell you what I think about it. Well, then don't go anywhere when we're done. I want to talk to you. But really, with this book baby out in the world, what is next? Okay, so the book is coming out Tuesday. So what is your event schedule looking like? What can we expect out of this book baby and tour?
It's
tell
so
you
hard
when we
because of
go.
COVID. Like,
Yeah.
I know it's a tour.
It's really hard. Like y'all, I will say, especially since Jessica, I think you have a book coming out soon, right? Was that soon that you have it coming out?
Mhm,
It's really hard during a pandemic
mhm.
to plan anything, because a lot of, like, Kim and I tend to really love being in person with people, and like this is our preferred format for talking to people about the book and what we want to accomplish, and a lot of those opportunities that we relied on the first time around don't exist anymore. Some of the big trade shows are gone and stuff.
I mean,
So
even like BEA is like just dead, like never coming back.
no more BEA.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's, I mean, we have some school visits and stuff coming up. We actually, if you're in Atlanta, we have an in-person event on Saturday. We have a Zoom event on Tuesday night, and we'll let you know the rest when we know.
No, I
But
understand
our
completely.
launch is Tuesday, and it's a
Uh-huh.
Zoom, so anywhere in the world can attend.
There you go. There's something, I mean, I know it's not, it hasn't been the most effective way to sell books, but this whole use of technology has actually really, to me anyway, has kind of opened up possibilities for the future. You know, you want to get back and do the in-person stuff, but you know, maybe we can like weave these things in there so that there are opportunities for people around the world to be able to get it. So at least you have that, but I understand.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like there's, so I think this past, I don't know, 18 months has been like, there's amazing parts of this. And I really love that there's more access. So people who are not in your immediate location can get to see you. And there are authors who are abroad that their publishers never pay for them to travel to the US who have gotten to participate in stuff. So it's like, yay, let's keep the good parts. But also I kind of miss people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had somebody ask me that the other day, like what I gained out of the pandemic the most, and it was a new appreciation for being around people, and I'm not prone to that. So yeah, well, yeah, but give you a microphone and a stage, you don't care if there's anybody there. That's
No,
a
I
difference.
Gilly and I have a
Um,
rule that as long as there's more people in the audience than on the stage, it's a successful event.
Win.
I understand. Well, we're running up at the end of it, and I have one more question. And since your books are geared toward teens, and there's always an underlying message and relatability that the teens can focus on, if you could give your teen readers one message, what would it be?
Like related to the book, or just
No, just you talking to your teen readers.
So I'm going to steal Shauna Miles's. We were on a panel this past weekend with Shauna Miles, who's another local Georgia author. Her book is called
Yay,
For All Time, and it
Her
just
book just came out Tuesday.
Yeah, so yay, support debut. We were asked this very question, and she gave the world's greatest answer, which was, the rest of us all authors were like, yes, and it sums up to this: become financially literate. Like, learn early on. Don't sign up for credit cards in college. Don't max up your credit cards. Understand how to balance your account. Nobody writes checks anymore, but like, balance your account so that you're not going into minus, because the entirety of your life will be different if you are financially literate and able to make good financial choices. That just opens lots of doors. Yeah, see if there's, every adult that hears this is like, yes, oh my God. Like, if your college or high school or community center or faith-based organization or whatever it is offers a financial literacy class, take it.
Take it, because how many of us even understood how our credit score changes or adjusted until it was too late, and then we had to like fix it. But I will say, piggybacking off of that, this is my go-to one that people think is silly, but I think it means the world to me, is like, buy good shoes. Scrimp on everything else in the world. Do not scrimp on good shoes, because they affect your feet, your back, the way in which you walk. All of that is affected by having bad shoes. And it sounds silly, but when you're like 60 and your spine is still upright because you invested in good shoes, you will be thanking me.
It's really true, especially for women, right? Like, or anyone who wears more stereotypically female shoes. Like, those stilettos are hot, but you are going to regret them when you have bunions.
Yep, when you have bunions and corns, and when your arches have fallen, and honestly, this all affects your like upright mobility and your posture and all of that. Buy good shoes. Buy a cheap blouse. It has no effect on your life. Spend that money on your footwear.
I love how some authors are like uplifting and, be kind to yourself and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, don't get bunions.
Yeah, we're like, don't get bunions. And
She's like,
don't bounce your checks. There it
is. Learn about money and buy good shoes.
Don't bounce your checks and don't get bunions on your feet. That's it. That's our life advice.
That's our legacy.
There's another t-shirt.
I honestly don't think we can do better than those answers. So we'll wrap it up there. Before we sign off, you guys hang in there because I do have some stuff for you. But thank you to you both for being here. I wish you nothing but the best of luck with this new book, especially in the time that we're in. I have no doubt that it will do well. Yes, there it is right there. And yes. And to our attendees, thank you very much. To those watching the stream on YouTube, thank you for coming to our channel and support these wonderful authors. Buy their books at independent bookstores. We do want our pillars of our community to continue to thrive and grow, and they need your support as much as the authors need your support. And thank you all, and have a good night.
Have a good night.